Okay, we are here today at the Department of Veterans Affairs on the 21st floor in Tallahassee. And we're here doing an interview. We have several people attending the interview. We have Trevor Tapete. We also have Joshua Johnson and myself, the Executive Director for the Children's Coalition Incorporated, Carlton Cartwright. Our other interviewer is Wendy Vet Edwards.
Hi, I just want to start off by saying hi. I'm
Hi,
Wendy
nice
Vet
to
Edwards.
see you. I'm Steve Murray. Nice to see
meet
you.
My first question is, were you drafted or did you enlist into Air Force?
I volunteered. I got out of college and wasn't sure what I wanted to do with myself. And was going along one track, and suddenly another opportunity presented itself, and that was the United States Air Force. And so I was a volunteer, so they speak. It's an all-recruited force, as we like to say in the military, not an all-volunteer force. And found myself about 4 months after college down in San Antonio, Texas, at Lackland Air Force Base. Enrolled in officer training school, and a few months later was commissioned as a second lieutenant.
So where were you living before you moved to the base?
Well, I had just finished college at the University of Southern Mississippi and was living in Memphis, Tennessee at the time, and ended up entering the service from Tennessee, and then driving straight from Tennessee, and 2 days later found myself in San Antonio at Lackland. There it was.
So did you have any other offers from different branches of the military, or?
I looked at a couple of other options. I looked at the Navy. My father was in the United States Navy at the time, and so I thought, okay, like father, like son, that could have been an opportunity. And looked at the Air Force because my roommates in college were Air Force ROTC. And so I was a little bit familiar with the Air Force, but not a whole lot. I was much more comfortable with the Navy. So looked at both the Air Force and the Navy coming out of college, and the Air Force had better programs based on my major, took better care of its people at that time, and so made that decision.
Where did you graduate from school?
Class of 1985 in Hattiesburg.
Oh, okay.
Do you recall your first days in service?
Oh yes, very scary. I, 22 years old, showing up at this military base that I had never been on, entering a service that I knew very little about, and absolutely had butterflies and just, what have I gotten myself into? I'm over my head. Can I handle this? Is it too late to get out? Those kind of things that run through your mind. Sure, lots of apprehension and butterflies and those kind of things, but those settle down because they break you down and then build you back up. They build you into a leader of men and women so that you can function and lead people in both peacetime and wartime. And so it's tough at the beginning, but it's certainly rewarding.
So can you tell me about your boot camp experience?
Well, a lot of it was at the very beginning, marching and stuff like that, and I was terrible. Had no coordination, still have no coordination, two left feet kind of thing. And a lot of drill and order and discipline, a lot of book learning about the history of the Air Force and its heritage, learning about leadership skills, and learning about how not to do things as much as how to do things. And so that was just, a lot of memories of marching and physical fitness. Certainly, they want to prepare you physically as much as mentally there. So there was a lot of physical training and a lot of running. And I just remember having lots of blisters on my feet coming out of that. So.
Wow. So how did you get through it? Did you have like an instructor that you could remember that helped you, or?
A lot of it was just mental discipline and realizing that I couldn't fail. That if I did, that would, I wouldn't say shame my family, but that wouldn't look good on me. And I figured, no, I can do this. And after, I think after a couple of weeks, the instructors take you aside after they've beaten all the folks down, and they say, hey, you're going to be okay. Just relax, push through it, give it everything you've got, and we're trying to make leaders of you. And that's the kind of thing. So once you settle down after a couple of weeks and your mentors are out there telling you you can do it, then you can do it.
So would you say that was a sign to let you know that it was
Oh,
gonna be
absolutely.
okay?
I think that was a sign. Very early on, the first couple of weeks when my flight commander took me aside and said, relax, you're doing great, don't sweat the small stuff, get in there and give it your best. Those kind of pep talks, especially early on, really helped.
Oh, which wars did you serve in?
I served in Operation Iraqi Freedom. I spent a great deal of 2004 over in Baghdad, Iraq, as part of what was then called Combined Joint Task Force 7, which was basically the parent unit of American forces in Iraq at that time.
What exactly did you do?
Well, my title was Chief of Current Operations. It was basically a command post type operation where I was there monitoring the news media and monitoring activities within the country and advising the senior leaders in the room on what was happening and the implications of what was happening from a communications, public relations, external outreach kind of thing to help them prepare for media interviews with local press in Iraq and with television stations back in the States, like the Today Show and Good Morning America and things like that. And just make sure that they kind of had a good sight picture on what was happening. A lot of detail in a battle zone and stuff like that. So I was kind of taking the abstract and just kind of presenting some highlights to kind of put things in perspective. That's kind of the role that I performed.
Do you remember arriving in Iraq?
Oh yes, very much so. I took a C-130 flight, which is a big 4-engine propeller-driven cargo plane, along with a bunch of other GIs and in what we call battle rattles. So we had gear on and helmets, and we were sitting shoulder to shoulder, and in front of us where I could touch it was a big pallet of all of our gear and stuff like that. And in order to land at Baghdad International Airport at that time, you had to do a corkscrew landing, which means the pilot put the plane on its side and just kind of spiral down that way, and that way you were avoiding surface-to-air missiles by being very close to the airfield at that time. So it was kind of funny looking out the one window that I could see over on the right side of the plane. I was seated on the left side of the plane, and it looked like you were flying over a little model train set. But in reality, we were flying over the airfield, and it was just getting larger because we were just doing some very tight concentric circles in order to land. And that was loads of fun.
What was your job assignment?
Well, I have been, throughout my Air Force career, a public affairs officer. So I dealt with the news media. I dealt with local community leaders as a liaison between the military installation and the civilian population. And then I did what we would call employee communication. I would make sure that the men and women who lived on the military installation knew what was happening in the community, so we were good stewards of the community. And of course, many of our folks lived out in the community, didn't necessarily live on base. And so translated that between a career of that and in doing similar things in Iraq when I was there, only more focused on more of a media relations, community climate focus while I was in Iraq.
Did you see combat?
I fortunately never had to fire my weapon in self-defense. I spent the entire tour in Baghdad itself, between what was called the Green Zone and a place called Camp Victory, which was near the Baghdad International Airport. So fortunately, I never had to fire my weapon in anger. We took some incoming mortar and rocket rounds and stuff like that, but it was fairly sporadic and not well aimed, thank goodness. Caused my mom a lot of consternation, but okay.
Were there many casualties in your unit?
Not where I was, thank goodness. We did take, of course, casualties when I was there in Iraq, and sometimes it totaled, 120, 130 a month. And it was difficult to see those casualty reports come through, knowing that those were fellow Americans there, but yeah, tough.
Can you tell me about a couple of your most memorable moments?
While I was in Iraq,
Yes.
or just in general? In Iraq, I felt like a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, which is the name of an old movie. I think Bing Crosby was in it. But it just, I felt very out of place. Here I was, born and raised in the United States. All of a sudden, for the first time, I found myself in a foreign nation and a foreign culture that I was not used to being in. And so I felt very isolated. And fortunately, by taking personal items and music and stuff like that, was able to kind of ground myself and understand where I was and what I was doing. Certainly respectful of the culture and customs of where we were, and making sure that others were observant of those cultures and customs and stuff like that. So just remember it being very different. It was a desert environment, very cold in the wintertime, very hot in the summertime. So it's, you'd have a parka in January, and by May, you were up to 120 degrees in some places. So it was like, big temperature differences just in a few months there. So, and I just remember the food too. I lost 8 pounds while I was over there. So the food they brought over for the American troops, at least where I was, not the best, but it's, what can you do?
Were you a prisoner of war?
Nope, never a prisoner of war.
Did you know anyone that was?
Not while I was in Iraq, no.
Were you awarded any medals or citations?
I have a career full of awards and citations of varying degrees, and have been recognized for my body of work, and I'm pleased for that. And got a little display case in my current office that kind of reminds me of my military service and stuff like that, and I'll pass that down to my son, and hopefully he'll keep that in the family, just as my father's who will come to me eventually.
How did you get them?
Well, some of it is successfully completing a tour, and some of it is doing things above and beyond the ordinary. I ended up going to Keesler Air Force Base, Mississippi, right after Hurricane Katrina, and helping out an office there that had been flooded out, and all the people had lost their homes and they were gathering their belongings, and so I kind of came in to give them a little work relief while they got their household situations in order and stuff like that, and answered a lot of media queries and did a lot of speeches and things like that to help the installation commander explain to the local community what the base was doing to help out folks in a time of great tragedy, many people homeless as a result of Hurricane Katrina. So, got a humanitarian award for that. So proud of those kind of things where, the service was a little bit above the ordinary. Fortunately, I came through without with any bodily injury, so I feel very pleased about that. So, how are you? Good to see you.
How was it like in service?
I enjoyed the Air Force very much. At that time when I joined, I was 22 years old, and they said the Air Force offered me opportunities in leadership and travel and things that I would not have experienced had I stayed a civilian. And indeed, in the first few years, I found myself living in Tokyo, Japan, which I never would have gotten to had I just stayed a civilian. All kinds of travel opportunities, they were right about that. Leadership opportunities, certainly. You start out, learning your craft, learning your trade. And then all of a sudden you've got a couple of people that you supervise, and then you move on to another assignment, and you've got a few more people that you're supervising, a little bit larger scope of responsibilities. And so I really liked that. And I just wasn't really planning a career, but 4 years turned into 8, 8 into 12, 12 into 16, and before I knew it, I had a career. almost just quite by accident. Just I was enjoying myself, and the Air Force was sending me to places that I enjoyed visiting, and got to see places of the United States I'd never been to before. I'd always been born and lived in southern states and really hadn't been exposed to some of these other places that I was visiting, and so that was, getting to see the rest of the country and getting to see Japan. I ended up 2 tours in Japan, a total of 5 years. Really liked Japan very much. Got to go to Hawaii and Alaska and Australia as a result of being over in the Pacific at times. So got to see a great deal of the world that I never would have had the opportunity to see had I done something else. So for that, I'm very grateful.
How was the food like?
The food, well, other than the time I was deployed in Iraq, I thought Air Force food was very good. Yeah, nothing wrong with the chow that they served us. Very, very good. So I was disappointed when I got overseas in Iraq, and I was just like, something's wrong here. I'm losing weight. And, but there you go.
So, did you have plenty supplies while you was over there?
I did, yeah. It's had no problems with supplies. While I was in Iraq, because you're in a war zone, you don't have to worry about a lot of paperwork and triplicate and stuff like that. The things that we needed to carry out our day-to-day mission and stuff like that, we were able to easily obtain and quickly obtain, which was very good. We didn't have to go through a lot of red tape to procure what we needed. So,
So, did you keep in contact with your family?
oh, absolutely. Especially when you're overseas. The first couple of times I was overseas in Japan, that was before there was email. So you either had to, handwrite a letter and put it in the mail, and then 2 weeks later it'd get there, and then 2 weeks later, you get the mail back. Or you make a long-distance telephone call, which could be very expensive from Japan to the United States. When I got to Iraq in 2004, there was by then email, and so I was able to keep in touch with my family almost on a daily basis with email. And there was the ability for a weekly telephone call. So I called my parents once a week, and I called my wife and son once a week to check in, just let them know that I was still there, doing okay, and that I loved them a lot, and I was looking forward to coming home.
So, how did people entertain themselves, especially you?
Well, when I was over in Iraq, people brought their own music. They listened to their own CDs. There was some Armed Forces television that was over there providing programming from the States, which was nice. We were able to see some international news through CNN, and I think Fox News was available to us over there as well. We didn't see newspapers where we were over there, but we saw lots of online content. Many newspapers are available online, and we're even in. So, that was one of my jobs, was to kind of help translate what was going on to some of the senior leaders who, because they were so busy, just didn't have an opportunity to read a magazine, look at a daily newspaper, understand what was being said in the daily United States press or the international press. The time zones are greatly different when you're over on the other side of the world. So it's, you're monitoring, morning news over here and evening news on this side, and then vice versa. So it was a great challenge.
What did you do when you left Air Force?
When I left the Air Force, I ended up back in San Antonio, Texas, where I'd started my Air Force career. I was finishing up the last year and a half of my tour at Air Force Recruiting Service, where I was their public affairs officer. And then I ended up retiring out of San Antonio, Texas in 2006. But being a native Floridian, I decided to see if there was anything close by so that it could be a little bit closer to family. And for the last 9 years, I've been communications director of the Florida Department of Veterans Affairs in Tallahassee, the capital.
So what were some pranks that you or the others pulled while in the Air Force? Force?
Pranks in the Air Force that I pulled. I don't think, I'm not a prankster by nature, so I can't recall any. You know, we would always joke about, you know, sending out the lowest ranking person to find prop wash or the keys to the plane or something like that, understanding that there are no keys to the aircraft kind of thing. But nothing really, you know, harmful or sinful comes to mind.
So, did you have a personal diary on you?
Personal diary. You know, the funny thing is I took a blank diary with me to Iraq, thinking that I wanted to record what was happening and stuff. And I found myself just so busy working 16-and-a-half-hour days without stop, and including Saturday and Sunday, that I felt so fatigued at the end of the day and only had about 5.5 hours to sleep before having to get up and do it all over again, that I didn't write anything down. But I wrote some thoughts down after I got home and stuff like that, because I wanted to keep that memory, and certainly and photographs that were taken and things like that. And of course, saved the emails. My family saved the emails that I had sent and things like that. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Okay. What influence, Colonel, did your service in the military have on your life? How did it affect your life? How did it affect your thinking?
Well, I come from a family of military men. Both my grandfather served in World War II, and my father was a Vietnam War veteran. So I felt very comfortable in a military environment because I had grown up around it. And certainly through John Wayne war movies and books on World War II that I loved and continue to love to this day, it was in my comfort zone, even though I felt very uncomfortable at military training, because it's like, oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into? You know, I'm used to reading about this, not used to living it. But I felt very comfortable being in the military, and certainly now, even to this day, 9 years after retirement, working with and working for veterans. And so I felt very gratified.
And so, when did you finally separate from the service, active duty?
Retired in 2006 after a little bit more than 20 years of service.
Okay. And immediately afterwards, what did you do?
For about 7.5 weeks, I was looking for work until I found work with the Florida Department of Veterans Affairs. So very quickly after retirement, I was hired here in Tallahassee.
And how long have you been with the department now?
9 years.
Okay.
Hard to believe.
Do you recall the day your service ended?
Yes. We had a ceremony at my base, and my family flew in from all over the country for the ceremony. And, you know, the typical, you know, your boss says nice things about you in front of your family and your friends, which is nice and everything. Had a big cake and stuff like that, but it was almost surreal, because after it was over with, it was like, wow, wait a minute, is that it? Is it, I'm over it. What do I do next? You know, I've got to find employment, you know, so it's just, you know, I kind of had an idea of what I wanted to do and where I was going, but at the time I was getting out, you know, it was the perfect time to retire, and it worked out very well in coming back to Florida and in resuming work helping veterans. One of the things I found being in Iraq was that a lesson learned was wanting to help all these men and women. These were reservists and National Guardsmen who really didn't anticipate being called up to a war zone, and it was just an idea to do something bigger than yourself, to help provide services and counseling to these veterans and stuff like that. And so by joining an organization such as the Florida Department of Veterans Affairs, I was able to help fulfill that personal desire to do something to give back to those folks that I was serving with. So it's been very gratifying.
Well, I think you mentioned all the places that you had served, sir.
Oh, okay.
Have you mentioned every place that you've served?
Yeah, well, I'll just give you a quick litany there. I Started out at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in beautiful Dayton, Ohio, home of the Air Force Museum. Then went over to Tokyo, Japan for a couple of years. Great assignment. Japanese are wonderful people, great culture, customs. Then came back to Moody Air Force Base in Valdosta, Georgia, and met my future wife there. And then from there went back to Japan and to Misawa Air Base. And from there went to Washington, D.C. Had 3 tours in Washington doing various things. Then back to Randolph Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas, and ended up retiring out of San Antonio. And while I was in San Antonio, ended up deploying to Iraq as part of Operation Iraqi Freedom. So it's a lot of wear and tear on the furniture. That's what it is.
What did you do in the days and weeks after you were done serving?
Well, I locked myself up in the home office and cranked out 1,000 resumes looking for work, something that would suit me, something that I would enjoy, something that I could make a living at so I could raise my family, and was very gratified that someone paid attention and saw a resume out there and gave me a call and called me in for an interview and was able to land my current job 9 years ago. So it's, whatever it was, skill, luck, combination of both, just very happy. But it was just a lot of work on polishing resume and understanding where the jobs were and things like that.
Was it difficult trying to find one?
I think my wife would say so, sure, yeah. Trying to find employment when you're not employed, yeah. Stressful, sure, absolutely. But there are opportunities out there if you work hard enough for them. I was very lucky.
Did you work or go back to school?
Did you use the GI Bill, sir?
Didn't use the GI Bill.
Okay.
I'm still eligible for the post 9/11 GI Bill, but no, because I was able to find employment and I already had a master's degree, decided to keep working and still have that GI Bill benefit there if I need it. But right now I'm enjoying what I'm doing, so it just stays there right now.
What is the GI Bill?
The GI Bill is a benefit for veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan and other post 9/11 veterans who come back, and the federal government will pay for them to get an undergraduate or in some cases a graduate degree at no cost to them. It'll provide for their, in some cases, their room and board and their books, but mainly their tuition and stuff like that. It can be a huge financial impact on veterans. So this benefit is available to help them get a degree so they can enter the job market and be productive citizens and become tax-paying citizens. So there's an added benefit to the country as well. So our veterans deserve that benefit, and they're taking advantage of it in huge numbers.
Did you make any close friendships while in the service?
Oh, sure. I still keep in touch with many people from my years of service. And matter of fact, next week I'm seeing a friend that I haven't seen in almost 10 years, and I'll see him for the first time. He's going to fly out to Colorado to meet me, which is very nice. And so we'll get to have sort of a little reunion there and share on old times and catch up on what the families have been doing, things like that. So absolutely, it's one of the great things through that and through social media to catch up with some of the people that you served with, your friends.
Did you join a veterans organization?
Boy, did I. In the
Works
Florida
for me.
Department of Veterans Affairs. You can't ask for a bigger one. But I'm also involved in the Air Force Association and the Military Officers Association of America. Keep up with them and help understand what's going on with the armed forces today since I've been out. So, great organizations. And there are many others out there that do a great job.
If in a veterans organization, what kinds of activities does your post or association have?
Well, here in Tallahassee, the local chapters of the Air Force Association and the Military Officers Association of America, or MOA, have regular meetings. They're typically quarterly meetings, and they bring their membership along, and they kind of brief them on what some of the things that are happening with active duty soldiers, sailors, airmen, marine, and some Coast Guardsmen are happening right now, and questions about benefits and services that they're eligible for, and because these are like-minded individuals, these are either fellow retirees or fellow members of the United States Air Force and everything, you know, there's a common thread of interest and stuff like that. They'll often bring in guest speakers from the local community to find out what's going on, because these are also members of the local community. Many of them are leaders themselves, and so, you know, there's a great chance of interface between the military and the civilian there. So I enjoy attending those meetings and learning more about the community and having the community learn more about us.
Do you attend reunions with former veterans?
They are certainly out there, but the units that I served with, really, it's so fresh that they haven't had reunions. I would imagine here in 20 or 30 years that as Iraqi veterans are older and stuff like that, that we'll see more reunions and stuff like that. I mean, we're still in Afghanistan, we're still in Iraq all these years later, so it may be a little too soon for some reunions and those kind of things, but I'm sure we'll see those in the future.
Okay, were you married before you went into the service, or did you get married?
Got married while I was in the service. So met my wife while I was married while I was stationed at Moody Air Force Base in Valdosta, Georgia, about 5 years into my Air Force career.
And would you say that, being that your family was in the war and full of veterans, did you feel obligated to go into the service, or did you plan on doing something else before the opportunity came?
I felt like it was a strong option, but I didn't feel obligated, and I felt no pressure from my family to enter the military service. And they certainly said they would support me in whatever endeavor I decided to go for. But there were no threats or anything like that. It was just something that kind of happened naturally. It was a path that I was able to take. I had some other choices. Chose the Air Force, and looking back on it all these years later, it was certainly the right choice, and really enjoyed my time.
So do you remember what you wanted to be before the option of the Air Force came along?
Well, my degree was in broadcast journalism, and I wanted to be a television anchorman. And I had spent a lot of time in radio. I had an internship with a CBS affiliate, and then the anchorman of my campus television station. So I was prepared to be that anchorman. But the Air Force presented other opportunities for me that I found interesting at the time, and I said, yeah, let's try this for a little bit. Again, I wasn't thinking about a career. I said, okay, 4 years, but 4 turned into 8, and then before I knew it, boom, I was retirement eligible. Hard to believe.
So that's why you're so great at this. But is there anything else you would like to add, or any other questions that you'd like to ask or add that we haven't covered?
I think you've covered everything multiple times, but I appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you very
much.
much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.